world. It might not still be Sunday, but yeah, welcome back. If you have any questions of anything that we're talking about today, drop them in the chat. I would love to see that. Let me know if you can hear the sound. I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of. Let me know if you can hear that stuff going. And we'll see if we have the sound correct. So yeah, welcome. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I generally spend a lot of time talking about live performance, and today I want to talk about another topic which I really enjoy, which is using hardware and live performance gear, particularly modular, but this could be any kind of gear really, in production and in the generation and creation of ideas. So today we're going to talk about something that I like to call cross-patching, or basically using two separate systems. So that's why we've got this other view here today. So I have this is my live rig that I take with me when I go to perform. And this is all stuff that stays in the studio, or kind of a library of modules, or modules that I use that are not great for live because they're not super fast and immediate to create stuff. But they're really cool for designing really awesome sounds, but maybe they're not the easiest thing in the world to do it quickly. So it doesn't lend itself to improvised live performance, but it lends itself to creating cool sounds in studio. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we can use those sounds either in production, or we can sample those sounds and then load them back into samplers and use them in live performance. And so it's a way to kind of take studio hardware gear out with you, or at least the sounds of it out with you, without having to bring the whole gear, right? Bring all the stuff with you. So yeah, so jump in the chat. Let me know if you have questions about what we're talking about, if there's anything in particular that you'd like me to go over or discuss or talk through. And if I know the answer, I'll tell you. And if I don't, I'll let you know that I don't know the answer. But what we definitely want to do is chat a bit about how we can use these different things in different ways. So rather than just the normal, here's how you perform live, this is different types of ways that you can use gear. So we'll walk through a little bit about how it's set up, how I'm using it right now, and then what I would use that for. So that's what we're going to go for. So if you have questions, pop them into the chat. I'm going to check it out here and see if we have any questions going. Hey, Ruffian, what's going on? My friend all the way from the Netherlands. Good to see you here. Yeah, and say hi and say where you're from. I keep forgetting to say that, but it's always one of my favorite things to say, to see how far these streams go. Right, this is from like my basement in Colorado, so it's nice to see how far these go out and around the world. So put a message in there and say where you're from. Hey Levi, what's going on? Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome. Yeah, let's just put a little bit of sound in here to hear what this sounds like. All right, so just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about is exactly that. So let's see here. So basically what we're doing here is, as I mentioned before, we have two different setups. This is kind of, it's all in one modular setup that is for live performance. This is what I travel with when I go to play shows. I'll take this with me, fold this case up, chuck it into a bag, and take it as my carry-on luggage. And it's got about, I think between the Blackbox and this, I think I have like 20 something voices, 28 voices that I can use. Lots of effects, modulation, mixing, effects processing, signal processing, all of that stuff. And so all of that is kind of fitting in here. Now, in order to fit all of that stuff into a case this size, I need to be able to reduce down the size of a lot of things. So one thing you'll notice here is I have a lot of complete voices. So like the Erica Synth bassline, the Perkons voice, the Polycinematic, the BIA, the Warp. These are all voices that most of them, the only thing they need is a filter, or some of them don't even need that because they have a filter built in. So it keeps me from, I don't have any VCAs in my case. I don't have any envelopes in my case. I don't have any of that stuff because I don't need to build voices. I've got voices that are all self-contained and that are, that can work as an independent synth, as if each one was like a standalone desktop synth, but I have a whole bunch of them packed into one case. Now, that limits me because I don't have the space to be able to build out intricate, cool, complicated voices. So what I do in that case, switch views here, is I have a studio setup here, which is kind of like modules that I love that don't necessarily go with my live performance rig, right? They don't necessarily lend themselves to live performance. And so I keep those here in this case in order to be able to be used for cases like what we're doing today, which is making sounds and creating things that I will use maybe in my live performance, or that I will use maybe in a production that allows me a bit more flexibility and expansion than what I get within my live case. So as an example right now, that voice that you guys were just hearing, so let me play just this one. So that voice right there is completely coming from this case. It's being sequenced over here in the Oxy One. It's sequenced through the Oxy pipe. The CV and gate from that are coming out and going across into this case, into Volt Per Octave is going into an oscillator over here, and the gate is going into another type of a sequencer, which we'll talk about in a second, kind of a sequence modifier. That's then going into an envelope, which is then going into a VCA, which is then going into a filter, which is then going into effects, which is then going into the mixer, which is then coming back across, going back into this mixer over on this side. So it's going, signal is going from here across to here, through all of this stuff, back to here, so then it can go out all together from my main. And that allows me to do things like test sounds out, try them out and say, oh, would this be good with performance? How does this play with the other sounds that I have? How do they go together? And it allows me to listen to them. It allows me to play around with performance effects while using things in this case without having to completely redo a case, right? So like move things from there over to here. Now, why would I do something like that? Well, just to think about this, in my traditional case, I might have an entire voice in, this much space that would take up for an entire voice. Here I have the DPO, which is a complex oscillator, and this is just oscillator. Then I have envelope, which is going through maths right here for the envelope, which is just envelope, which is going into the quad VCA, which is just VCA. And then that's going into this filter, which is just filter. So this whole voice would probably take up an entire row if they were all on the same row between the effects and all of that stuff. So they would take up a lot of space. So if I was to put those in my travel case, I would sacrifice a lot of space, right? It would take up an entire row like here just for one voice. Now, that might be worth it in some cases. It might be interesting enough that you go, oh yeah, that voice is so good and it sounds so great and it has so much flexibility that I only want to put that one voice in that row, and I'll be willing to sacrifice 1, 2, 3, 8, so 11 voices in that space here to be able to put one voice. So that may be the case. So it's not that it's wrong. But the other thing for me that is another reason why I would use things in my studio case rather than here is just because the type of tools they are, they're a bit more fiddly, right? You have to do a lot more and tweak them and move things around and experiment a lot to find those exact sweet spots that you like. And that takes time. And sometimes, or generally, you don't have that much time to do that live on stage in front of a crowd. You don't want to be experimenting around and finding sounds. So a lot of things like the DPO, maybe a fantastic voice, but it's a bit too fiddly to be able to be used for live performance. It doesn't save presets. You'd have to dial everything in, and small changes, which I'll show you in just a little bit, can make really dramatic changes in the sound. And then it's kind of hard to find your way back to where that sound originally was. So because of that, it doesn't really lend itself to performance, but it makes great sounds, like you can hear with this sound that we were just working on. So I'll show you a little bit about what I mean. So let's go back over to this view. And I'll take off the effects. So this is the effect that's all without the effects. What's coming through, actually, take that off as well. So with the DPO, you have two different oscillators and they can affect each other differently. They can make different wave sounds. You can do wave folding, you have wave shape, all sorts of things. So little changes can make really dramatic changes in the sound of the voice. So just to give you an example, if I was to just make a small adjustment. And all of a sudden you're in a totally different place and it doesn't sound like what you want it to sound like. So to be able to kind of come back to where we want to be, so you can see there's a lot of fiddling around, and tiny little changes can make pretty dramatic changes in the sound of the voice. So because of that, it doesn't really lend itself to live performance, but it makes interesting sounds like this. Then you put them through an effect. Right? So then you can come up with something really interesting from a different type of voice than what you could probably fit into a travel case. Now, if you were to give up a whole row of space to be able to use a voice like this, you would want to make sure that it was something that you could get a lot of sounds out of, a lot of different types of sounds out of, while at the same time having a lot of control over it, so you can make those sounds really quick and you can dial things in really quick. So again, it doesn't really lend itself to that. Now, there's another side to this too. I'm using another device here that I want to talk about, which is the Proteus from Seaside Modular. You may not have seen this looking like this at the moment, because normally this has a blue panel, which I think I have the blue panel here somewhere. But anyway, they were nice enough when they sent this over to me to send me a black panel, because they know I like having black panels and stuff. So that's why it looks a bit different, but it is the same as the other Proteus, as the blue one. And what's interesting about this is you can connect things to this. For example, I have the gate coming from the Oxy One that I already had sequenced a pattern. That gate is coming into the gate in here, which is basically advancing another set of another set of sounds in there, which can be going to different pitches. Those are going out, that gate is going out from there after combining the two gates together into the envelope and into the VCA to make the sound. Whereas the other side, where we have the volt per octave out, that's combining the volt per octave or the pitch from the Oxy One and the volt per octave from inside the Proteus. So this is going out and going into the second oscillator in the DPO. So what does that sound like? So if I was to take that out, this is what it sounds like. I'm going to take the effects off a little bit. And if I was to take out the gate from this one and go straight into the maths, you hear how it's a very repetitive sounding pattern. That's the sound that's coming straight from the Oxy. But if I take that and put it into the Proteus, it adds that kind of glitchiness to the sequence, because instead of having this go at a set pace, that individual trigger or that individual gate is advancing the gate here. And I can reduce down or increase the density. So I can make it have a lot less in it, a lot less events, or I can move it way up. I can change the length of it as well. So you can see you can experiment around and find all sorts of interesting rhythmic patterns as well as sound design patterns. Now, that kind of exploration and finding your way around with the sequencer or with the synth doesn't really lend itself to live performance. But I want to be able to create these cool patterns and these cool sounds and then use them in performance. So what I do in that case is I will take these things and mess around and create something. Then I'll play with it with the rest of my rig. So I can see how they work together, right? I can test out sounds and say, you know what, I do like that. I do like how it goes with the sounds that are in my case. So in that case, once I find something that I like the way it sounds, I can take everything out except for that sound. And then I can do one of a couple of different things. For one, I can record this into Ableton. So my main outs from my rig here are going into Ableton. And so I can just record that in, just record that one individual part. I can process it. I can make sure that it sounds exactly right and that it's leveled up. And I do limiting and compression, make sure it sounds exactly right. Then I can export that sample and load it into the Blackbox. And then I can use that sample in the Blackbox during my sets. Now, an example of that would be, I have some samples in here which are similar. So there's sounds that are, so that's a sample from a modular. So it's a sample that's something that can be used here or something like this. So rather than using a whole voice or something within the case to do individual things like that, you can create them somewhere else. You can get a different interesting type of sound or a different interesting type of voice, and then you can sample that and use it as part of your live performance. So that's one way to do it. Or you can record it into Ableton and then use it in Ableton as part of a production. So if you wanted to save just that sound and have that be a lead line or an atmosphere or a breakdown or whatever in a production, you can use it that way as well. And then the final way, which is another way that I like to write music, is to be able to use these different pieces and parts and then record into Ableton full performances. So I can record in a track and I can perform that track in not only using things from my case, but also using things from the studio case as well. So being able to cross patch like this is one of the things that's really convenient about modular, because you can say, oh, if I want this instead of using this filter over here, I could patch it into a filter that's in my case and I can use that and try it out that way. Or if instead of using these effects, I wanted it to go through the ghost, for example, I can patch it into here and I can try it with that. So it allows you both different sets of tools to be able to be connected and used together, so that it's not you're not just limited to one set of tools that you have. So it's one of the beautiful things about modular is really the flexibility of it and the ability to kind of create whatever kind of configuration, whatever kind of instrument you want, and then use that to make the music that you want to make, rather than saying, what's the way that the designer from this company thought this synth would sound the best, and then I can use that in, you know, my way, but I'm still using it using their configuration. With this, if you come up with something creative and something unique and a new way to do something, you can just patch that and let that work together. So it just makes it really interesting. Now, the other thing that you can do when you cross patch as well is you can use like modulation sources. You can take a CV signal from one thing out and use it as a modulation source in another thing. So going back and forth can be really interesting, and it gets a little messy. I have a lot of really long cables here just for doing exactly this, for going back and forth between the cases. But it does open up a ton of freedom to be able to use stuff. And I think, you know, I get asked a lot in these chats and also in my courses and from people online asking like, what's the best this, or what's the best this, or which thing do you like the most? And my answer is always that it always depends on how you're going to use it. So there's a lot of things that for me are the best module to use in a live setup, and they may not be the most flexible, most usable module to use in a sound design creation studio type setup, and vice versa. There may be things like the DPO that I love to use here, but they don't lend themselves to live performance, so I don't want to limit myself. So it may be the best for one case and not the other, and you know, depending on the use case. So I would say that's one of the reasons why I don't always like to say this is the best, or this is my favorite, or this is whatever, because it really depends on how you're going to use them. Now, there's some exceptions. You know, there are some devices which which lend themselves a bit to both. It's one of the things that I love about the Noisite Warp is that it has this really deep sound design side. So you can go to what would be called like the studio mode, and you can go in and you can design and create sounds and add individual harmonics using additive synthesis and wavetable and FM and do all this cool stuff. And then you can assign things to the macros that are here and get out of the studio mode and into the performance mode. And then it's very playable live to use those things. So it's kind of like what we're doing with cross patching here, where you can take something here, fidgety, make it work, and then sample it and use it. In this case, you can do it in kind of a synth workflow where you can create sounds and come up with different kind of macros that you're going to use with those sounds, and then actually use that in the performance side of it. So every module is unique and every module is different. So it just kind of depends on which you're gonna use it for. So anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, please put it into the chat. I would love to go back and forth a little bit, answer whatever questions you guys have about this stuff or anything else. And yeah, so let's dive into the chat. So let's see. Levi's in Nashville, Ruffians in Rotterdam, Australia, love it. Happy Monday, I guess it is in Australia already. Don't have a direct question now. I just want to see you play with the Noisite Drop a lot for now. Yeah, so we'll go a little bit deeper into that because it's not officially out yet. So I'm using it, testing it, getting it sorted out, getting it all set to go. But yeah, It's pretty cool. I can answer questions about it if you want, but I'm not going to go too deep into it because I'll do videos about it a bit later on. Let's see, James, what's going on? Good to see ya. Stoked to see the drop. Yes, I'm stoked to use the drop. Violet, what's going on? I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you, man. Welcome, welcome. Doming, hey, what's going on? All the way from Miami. James, which algos you're liking with the Perkons voice? You know, the thing with the Perkons voice, it's really an interesting module. It's fast becoming a favorite of mine because obviously being the Perkons voice, it does a lot of drums and percussion stuff. So you can really easily, you know, if you want to do stuff like this, or if you want to, you can take the effects off here. Right? So you can do like snare stuff pretty easily, right? Or you can take that off and do more like tom stuff. And that's all just in one algorithm. But then you go back to like, you know, these ones are the kick algorithms, which are cool. I don't really need those because I'm using the battering ram. But those first three algorithms are great for kick. Here you have some really cool kind of, so some interesting types of synthesis on these. Again, if you wanted to do some crazy synthesized kick drum sounds, you can do that as well. Right? What I like about it is that beyond the percussive sounds, it creates a lot of cool kind of angry industrial sounds that you can use, like extending out the decay. And that's all kind of dry. So then you start to add in things like delay. And then I like to use this one a lot for kind of like, low toms. I use this a lot to kind of go along with my kick drum. Kind of like you would a low tom on a 909. So I'll do things that'll go. So a lot of different types of percussive sounds, which is, you know, very, very cool. And then of course you can get into the ones that are like the more like hat sounding stuff. Strong, which is cool because then you can come up with some really cool kind of stringy sounds. obviously a lot of flexibility as far as the voice goes. This is more like. So you can see you get a ton of different variety of sounds out of it. So it's not just a drum voice. I thought when I got the Perkons voice that I was going to be using it for drums and percussion. And to be honest, I almost never use it for drums and percussion. Other than those toms, that's kind of the one thing that I go to that I really like with it from a drum perspective. But everything else, I prefer these kind of more melodic sounds because we weren't even really messing with pitch there. But if I was just to add in a few different pitches on stuff and then play this and just go back through something. And what I like about these voices is that they're tonal, so you can use them for melodic elements, but because of the way the envelopes are set up in here to be a percussive voice, they tend to be really percussive and attacking, so they really cut through a mix of something. So like that sound you just heard right there, like if I had a background atmosphere and a kick and a sub and a hat, and maybe another voice. So you have a ton of stuff happening. That sound will still really cut through. Listen as I bring this in. So you can see because of the type of attack that it has and the type of noise that it has in the sounds, because it's designed to be percussive, it really cuts through a mix and really comes into those sounds in a great way. And then you can add some effects to it. And all of a sudden, it really doesn't sound like a drum voice anymore. Which that's kind of the way that I'm using it now. It's not really as a drum voice. So, anyway, yeah. What other questions you guys have? Let's take a look here. Hello from Germany. A little late. Need to go to bed. Have a good night. Enjoy your sleep. Let me know what other questions you guys have here. Happy to, again, like answer questions about any of the cross-patching stuff, the way I sample stuff, the way I record it and use it later on, and then also any of the way stuff is routed, and obviously any of the gear that's here as well. So happy to answer any of that stuff. In the meantime, while you think of a question, just to let you guys know, enrolling now for the August session of both my courses. There's a course on improvised live performance, and then there's also a course on hybrid production, which is a little bit more what we're talking about today, like how to use hardware in production and how to use production in hardware, and kind of bounce back and forth between the two, so that you can get the best out of both worlds, right? So you can get the best things from your hardware, the things that DAWs can't do or don't do easily, and you can get the best out of your DAWs, which are the things that your hardware can't do, or at least can't do easily. So good way to kind of go back and forth between those things and be able to kind of get the best of both in order to use your gear in all sorts of different ways. I will say as well, there's a discount right now. So if you go on to circlelive.com/courses, there's a discount to sign up for the August session. The August session starts in about 10 days, I believe. The second weekend in August we start. Goes live right away. You get access to all the videos and the online group. And then after that, we start doing twice weekly group Zoom calls to go over different questions and answers more in depth than what's in the videos. And then you also get feedback on either your productions, if it's the performance course, or sorry, the the hybrid course or your performances, you can do a 10-minute recording of a live performance each week. Send those in and I'll do my best to get back to you right away on those with some feedback. So it's good. I think you learn a lot. It's about a month long, but then you have ongoing access to all the videos. So you can watch those anytime you want. So that's my little plug for today, because I don't do sponsored videos. So these videos are sponsored by me, and I try to do my best to get the word out there about these courses so we can keep making this content that I love to make. So, but I got to be able to pay for it somehow. So, so jump in the courses. I would love to see you in there. Space available in both of those courses right now. If you've taken the performance course, the production course is a great way to continue on from there. It's a really good way to use what you learned in the performance course to then take that into the production side of things, and how to, save things and record things and make the music for other people to hear other than just for shows, but using the same kind of mentality that we use in the performance stuff. So anyway, what other questions do you guys have for me out there? What about the drop? So yeah, the Noisite drop is a new MIDI controller that's coming out in a few weeks. It's from the same guy as Noisite that made the Warp. They premiered it at Superbooth this year, and I'm helping them kind of with their final testing of it and trying it out with different pieces of gear and seeing how it works. It's pretty crazy powerful, which I'm very excited about. Different ways to be able to set it up and use different types of configurations of gear. So for example, like let's say I wanted to do a live show without my modular, and I just wanted to use like the Digitact and the analog rhythm and a couple synths. Well, I could do that and still control everything through the drop, and I can save all those presets in there so that when I go to play with that configuration, I just pull up that configuration and everything's ready to go and it's all mapped. And it does a whole bunch of other cool stuff. So anyway, let's see here. Can't tell what the module is to the left of the Polycinematic. Yes, so that is the Griffin's Claws from Shockmot. I just put a black faceplate on it. Normally it's a silver faceplate, but it is a 4-channel attenuator and modulation source and recorder. So the reason why I have it here is I don't do any kind of pre-patched modulation because my sets are improvised, so I don't know what I'm going to do. So I can't really pre-do modulation for things if I don't know where it's going to go. So I will use something like this and I'll live patch while I'm playing. So I can connect into a source on here, and then I can take that out to a source somewhere else. Let's say, I don't know, let's go into this. And so I can do, so this would make this now control the pizza rather than controlling it on the module. And why is that a cool thing? Well, what's interesting about that is now I can actually record that, any movements that I have. So I can just go here. And now it will keep doing that same modulation that I just did. So what's great about that is that if I come up with an idea for some modulation during the show, I can just quickly patch it, record it, and then move on and let that keep doing its thing while we go. And then if I want, I can just go in and erase. I can unpatch this, and now it's back to control. Now it's back to control there, right? Back over here. And then I can go right back into it. So it's very quick to switch back and forth between things. So it's a pretty awesome modulation source for on-the-fly improvised modulation rather than presetting stuff up in advance. And that way, it allows me to do a lot more modulation than I can do with my two hands, but I also don't have to pre-plan everything out and have only one kind of set way that things can work. This way I can gain a lot of kind of immediacy and control. And something else that I did with the way I set up the Griffin's Claws here is I have a mult on each side of this, a dual mult. And so the 4 channels of this are each going into one of the inputs of the mult. So I can send each one of those to 3 different destinations at the same time. So again, you can plug one thing in like I just did, but if you wanted to have that same kind of movement on, let's say, 3 different parameters or 3 different synth voices, you can take them all out really quick and you can have that same kind of recorded thing. And they can also affect one another. You can adjust whether you want this to be 0 to 10 volts or 0 to 5 volts. And you can also, what else can you change? So yeah, you can basically change up the way that it works, the way that it records, and that's using it as a modulation source. So with voltage coming out of it, but you can also use it as an attenuator. So if you wanted to, you can patch into it and then out, and you can use that as an attenuator, which can also be recorded. So you can record those movements and have that sent out any way that you like to. So that's what the Griffin's Claws is. Let's see here. What else? Hey, what's going on, Luke? Good to see ya. Do you record loops for use live or just little bits to sequence live from the Blackbox? So I actually don't use the Blackbox to sequence at all live. It's a bit too fiddly for me for live performance to try to go in and do things touchscreen and use the little individual little blocks to sequence. It's just, for me, it just doesn't work as a live performance sequencer. So everything that I sequence from the Oxy One. What I use the Blackbox for is generally loops, and because it does a pretty good job of time stretching, I can use loops that I want to pitch shift or not, and just time stretch to whatever I'm going to be using them for. So I use it sometimes for percussion loops. I use it a lot for atmospheres, and every once in a while for things like what I was recording earlier out of the studio modular, so that I can have kind of a lead line or something like that that I couldn't replicate in my system because I don't have that particular synth with me. I can do it using that. But yeah, with the Blackbox, I generally use loops, and then anything that's going to be sequenced is going to be sequenced live in a synth voice through the Oxy. I'm not big on sequencing samples, just not a thing for me. If I'm going to sequence, I like to be able to make the voice and have a lot of control over the individual voice as well. So yeah, so like as an example, I use it a lot for things like this, where I'll have like a background atmosphere that I will keep going on in the background as kind of a foundational element of a track, or every once in a while, like different effects, things like this. Let's see here. So things like that that are more difficult to create on the fly live in a modular, or would take up a lot of power of the case to be able to do just a single tone like that. I can record those things. Then I also will use these for vocals as well. That's another thing that, so something like this. That vocal just ended, but it'll loop back around again. Here it comes. So all of these sounds that you're hearing right now are all loops that are coming from the Blackbox, and they're being controlled by the drop. But I can use those all as kind of like background elements to the things that I'm doing live here. So if I've got hear how they all kind of fit together. So certain elements that are kind of background foundational things that just need to loop, they're not kind of the center of focus. I tend to use those samples, and then the rest of it is the stuff that I'm going to kind of move around those bits, rather than trying to have like one-shot samples and sequencing them in there. I'd rather do that with synths here. Adds to the background character of stuff. So if I was to take out something like the vocal, those movements, and the atmosphere, so things are still okay, but they don't have that same kind of full character, sounding like complete finished tracks, which is always kind of the challenge with modular or like hardware performance in particular. Modular in particular, is to try to fill it out and make it sound complete next to DJs that are playing completely produced finished tracks. So to be able to have things like an atmosphere back there that fills things out, or maybe some percussive elements. So it allows me to kind of fill out the sound spectrum with different pieces and parts that are kind of standard building blocks. They're not necessarily that individual character thing. However, as I mentioned before, with this whole cross-patching thing, sometimes I'm recording like a lead line or a cool thing from the studio modular, and then I'll put those in and use it something like this. That's just a loop that was recorded in there so that I can use that as a piece as I'm putting stuff together. Or if I don't want to, I can take that out and I can do kind of melodic stuff here with voices. So I can bring things in like that rather than using a sample, or I can use a sample if I want. Sometimes I won't use the atmosphere from here, and I'll create an atmosphere using effects. So you hear that tone that's coming from the BIA, but if I kind of spread that out using effects, that can be used as a background effect as well, or I can tighten back up the effect. And just have it going back into doing that thing and use a different type of effect. Something else that's important to note too, all of these sounds that I have that I'm using in the Blackbox, just because of the way I have the controls set up, with each one I have a volume fader, obviously, or a volume knob, so I can bring it in, but I also have a pitch, because for me it's very important to be able to place things in the spectrum, the frequency spectrum, where I need them, because I can't sidechain and EQ and do all that stuff afterwards, so I have to be really conscious of frequency bands. So for example, this atmosphere that's in the background, let's say I already have something in that, like, I don't know. So you hear that's kind of in the same frequency range. So then what I might do is I might take that atmosphere and pitch it up. So now it has its own space, so you can hear each one of those in the mix. Or maybe I pitch it down because I've got some open space. Rather than being right here in the exact same range as this other voice, right? So being able to do that is important, and it's the same for everything. So whether it's that or whether it's, you know, with this voice, maybe I'm playing in a different key, or maybe I want it to fit a different place in the frequency spectrum, so I can move that, I can pitch it, so I can make it fit where I need it to fit. Right, to be able to move those things around. So that's why for me, the one control I have besides volume over everything is pitch, because being able to pitch those, the frequencies of whatever I'm using to fit into the spaces that I have available is a way that I keep from muddying up my mix, because I don't have any way to unmuddy it once it's all messed up. I can't EQ and sidechain and do all that stuff, especially because I'm not presetting things in advance. So I don't know what's going to be on top of what. So I wouldn't even be able to create signal paths that would allow me to do that. And so I really needed to have a lot of control over frequency in order to be able to not mess those things up in the first place, right? While they're in there. So anyway, let's see what we got here. What modules in the chat using to make atmospheres? Cool. Hand that out there. Can you agree more? Making all those layers takes so much HP, so much easier to loop from a sampler and travel rig. Yeah, it's, to be honest, it's like something that I talk about a lot in my performance course is lean into your strengths, and then, you know, use your gear to make up for your weaknesses that you don't have. So like, I'm a terrible keyboard player, so that's why you don't see a keyboard in my rig. So I lean into my strengths as somebody who can do sound design and sequencing really well. So I'll do that stuff, and I'll stay away from keyboards because I suck at it. Same thing with this. If it's not something that you really enjoy or that you have fun with playing live, don't break your brain and try to do it live. You're not going to impress anybody. Nobody cares. 99.9% of the people in the crowd aren't nerds, and they're not like looking to see how you're doing what you're doing. They just care that it sounds good. So if it takes a lot of HP, which equals dollars and real estate, to make an atmosphere sound, well, you know what? Make your atmosphere sounds at home and just slap them into an effect or into a loop and just play it, right? So being able to have stuff like this that you can fall back on is great. And then use your money and your real estate in your case or on your table if you're using hardware to use things that you personally have fun with, that you enjoy, that will add to the live performance through the audience seeing you having fun time playing the thing. Like, nobody cares about your gear. Nobody's, you know, you're not there to show off like how many cool pieces of gear you have. So if you don't like it, or if you're not good at it, or if you're not going to use it much, you don't need it. Like, take it out and use something that's easier to do that thing. But if there's something that you're really good at, that you have a lot of fun doing, add that into your your performance, so that you can, you know, you can pass that on to your audience, the fun that you're having with the thing. So for me, my fun that I really enjoy, I love live sequencing and I love live sound design. So that's what this whole case is designed around, is creating things live on the fly, designing sounds, tweaking, making sounds and moving them in and out. And there's things that are just a pain and they're not fun to do. So those are the things that I put in a loop. Right? Obviously I can't do a vocal in the sense, I'm not going to sing myself. So I don't do that. But then there's other things that I can put in here that are, you know, those kind of background effects or things like that I just don't want to waste the time in the case doing, or they're not really fun to do. And even if they're fun to do and you can do them in your case, it's not interesting for the crowd watching the show to watch you make an atmosphere sound. It's interesting to watch you manipulate a lead line or a bass or some drums or things like that. They can see what you're doing and see that happen and go, oh, that's really cool. I like that. And it's harder to do when you're doing these kind of very fine, micro tweaked sound design things. People just don't, there's not as much interaction and it's not as much interest. So if you're trying to do an interesting show and make people have a great time watching, I would recommend doing things that are dynamic and fun in the live portion of it, and then doing the other stuff in a loop or sample, or recording it in your studio, or download something from a website, from a loop pack or sample pack or whatever. I love the Audio Tent samples, by the way. If you guys are looking for samples, those guys make very cool sounds, and very, all of it's made on hardware as far as I know. So it's, their stuff sounds great. I actually use a bunch of their stuff. I love how it sounds. So anyway, what else do we got going here? Questions. He's got the drop. Yes, he does. How's the learning curve on the drop? The learning curve on the drop, it's not that there's a huge learning curve, but it's very deep. This isn't you're just like Launch Control XL, plug it in and it just works type of device. This has so many different layers to what you can do with it. So you can go very deep with it. But it's funny, the workflow for me is really similar to the Warp, which is that there's this kind of setup studio mode where you nerd out and you go in and you kind of adjust, different curves, and you can do min-max for things. And every knob can have 8 different destinations across multiple different MIDI paths, across multiple different devices, and each one can act differently. And you can have one turning up while the others turn down on the same macro, like all of this detail that you can add into it. But then once it's done, you just save a preset and you're done. And then you just plug it in and go. So it's not that there's a learning curve, but depending on how deep you want to get with the functionality of it, I would suggest planning to take a good amount of time to set it up, because you're just going to get more out of it that way. Like the more time I spend with it, I'm like, oh, damn, it does that. Oh, wow, I can do that. That's so cool. And I just keep finding new things for it. There are some preset configurations that come. There's a database in there of preset configurations. So for example, if you have any of the Electron devices, I think they're all listed, if I'm not wrong. So you have kind of a preset configuration for every device, and then you can go in and tweak those presets, right? So you can say, okay, I want to set up most everything in this standard way, and then there's a couple things that I want to do differently, and you can go in and tweak those and save those as your own kind of preset. So it's very cool. I will just say I have not been disappointed by it at all. It's very, very cool. So anyway, that's what I would say as far as learning curve goes. Let's see. You're pissed. Why are you pissed? Are you jealous? Don't be jealous. You can get one too. They're almost out. They'll be out in days, weeks, very few weeks. So more like days. So don't worry. Let's see. I use a couple MIDI preset programming. For example, the Noisite Warps MIDI sometimes hold a foundation sound. Preset and manual labor out of getting it. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way with the Warp. I mean, that's one of the things that I like. So I'm not big with my live performances in saving presets and then going back and using that exact preset. What's really cool with the Warp is that you can set up this galaxy that's here, where, I don't know if you can see, but you can kind of move things around using these controls to move them to different places. And around this galaxy, this is 512 individual slots for wavetables or additive synthesis, voice creation. You can create your own voice, your own wavetables, your own whatever, or load them in from other sources, and you can put them there. But let's say you only put in 4. You put one on each corner, and let's say like there's a preset here where you've got like a square in one corner and a saw and a triangle, and so you've got different, and a sine wave. So you've got different sounds in each corner. Then with the movement of the 2 knobs that kind of move things on the XY around that galaxy, you're blending between those pure sound waves. Now you can do the exact same thing with wavetables or additive synthesis. So you could just put in 4 different wavetables that are really different and unique, and that's it, and have that morph kind of between them, and then you can modulate to have it move around and however you want. And you can set up the macros to control those however you want. Or you can go as deep and granular as you want, where you could put 512 individual wavetables, and every little morph movement change will be morphing between all of those different parameters of the wavetables. So it can go as deep as you want, or you can just keep it like really surface level and use it that way, and then just use these macro knobs to control things like filters and envelopes and kind of the standard stuff, which you can also do once you have the wavetables, right? So you can have a wavetable where you can move around to a bunch of different sounds, and then you can have the macros controlling things like decay and, you know, filter cutoff and stuff. So that way you can still get that same kind of performance control, but with a really, 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 really deep sound design engine. So it's very cool. Another thing I've just kind of scratched the surface of though, so I'll let you know. Let's see. Let's see what else. Been using Sauvage Engineering delay and effects aid and filter. Yeah, that would be a great one for making those atmospheres. Can I ask what brand of Eurorack cables are they? Yeah. Are they the same besides them being black? Yeah, I think I have like 3 or 4 maybe in here that aren't the same because I didn't have enough of the right size. But pretty much everything else is, I can show you a small version of one. Pretty much everything else is these, which actually I'll show you here, is these are from Luigi's Modular, and I love them because the top piece is really tiny, so they don't bump into each other. With some of them, you have to, if you use these 90-degree cables, you have to kind of move them around in a circle if you've got a bunch of things that are close to each other. And with this, they go right next to each other, which is really nice. It makes for, you know, tight connections of things, and you can kind of put them in between each other, which are great. So I love these, and I love that they're 90 degrees. So basically everything in my case, except for these gray ones that I'm using to cross patch right now, and the MIDI cables, because those come out when I travel. Everything else is these Luigi's Modular 90-degree cables, because that way, like this case will close with full length cables on it, but I just love the security of knowing that if things were to touch or if something goes in between them, it's just going to push things in farther, right? It's not going to snap something off like it might if it was a full height cable. And you can see like the difference in height between these is pretty crazy. So yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but anyway. So yeah, Luigi's Modular, you can order them. There's I can't remember the name of the online store. You can get them through Amazon, but you can also go directly to their online store and get those as well. And Luigi's from here in Denver, so I'm super excited about supporting the local dudes. So anyway, let's see, what else? Haven't used the FX8 as a filter yet. I haven't either. I actually have a bunch of those FX8s because I love them because they're small, and I haven't used those as filters either. So I should try that sometime if I get short on filters. Let's see. Picked up the battering ram after I've seen you use it. Man, that module hits the spot. It does, doesn't it? I will say I have a new module coming tomorrow. I got my UPS notification today that it's arriving tomorrow. It's actually a group of modules that I'm pretty excited to test out. And I think I'm actually going to do the same cross-patching thing. That's why I have some big gaping holes in my case right now, is because so I can fit them in here. But I'm getting the Ohm Force Bohm kick drum, kick rumble-ish thing, and sidechain. They all kind of work together as a unit, which should be pretty cool. I tested it out at Superbooth, and it kind of blew me away. It sounded amazing, but it wasn't just the sound. It was the playability of it, which was really interesting. They were very smart with the way they made the controls so that you have, you know, for example, things like filter and volume control over just the rumble part of the kick. So being able to filter it just right and set the level next to the kick, using really simple controls, right? So the way they did the controls was really interesting, and it made it really fun. The kick algorithms that they have in there, and the samples and the wavetables that they have it based on sound really great. So I'm interested in hearing that. I'm not taking my battering ram out of my case. I'm going to still have this and probably the other one as well, and I'm going to use them for different things. I have some different ideas. When I was using the Bohm, it worked really well as kind of low tom sub type kick with that kind of interesting delay, 3-tap delay, rumble-ish stuff that it does. So I'm excited to try that and see with the battering ram as kind of a primary kick, see how those go together. And that frees up the Perkons voice, which I've been using as that kind of rumbly, delay-ish sound, but I've been sequencing it. And then I can use that a little bit more as that kind of industrial sounding, tonal, metallic, percussive voices. So we'll see. You'll see a big shift in my case coming up. Yeah, you'll see a big shift in my case because I have that coming up, and then in a few weeks, the new Morph modular case will arrive, and that's going to have a couple of 1U rows. So I'm working on designs in modular grid right now, like what did I have in full 3U, am I going to switch to 1U, like what functionality? And that's going to free up some space in the 3U. What am I going to use that for? Obviously, some's going to be for the Bohm and the other stuff. So yeah, there's going to be a big overhaul of the case coming soon, prior to my fall gig schedule. So I'm excited to do all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's but the battering ram is still my favorite kick for sure. Is the Ohm Forces on my next list? Yeah. Not a huge fan of digital kicks. Yeah, and what's interesting with these is that they're this interesting combination, like the sound sources for the kicks are an interesting combination of sample and wavetable, and then they've put in really good controls as far as like adding transient attack and shaping the sound so that it really, you don't get the feeling that you're using just like a digital kick sample. It really sounds interesting. And they mentioned that there's going to be a lot more kick kind of foundational sounds that are going to be coming out. And they said that they can do, or you can do custom kicks to go in it. So like if you have a kick that you like the battering ram, you can make a battering ram wavetable using these parameters that they have and then load that in so that you can have similar sounds if you want to do it that way. So yeah, and like I said, I agree with you. They came up with a really cool way to control the sound, just like what they do with the battering ram. Like that's was kind of what struck me when I played it at Superbooth, was the same thing that struck me with the battering ram, which was that anywhere you move it, it didn't sound bad. Like you have, it's just sweet spot after sweet spot after sweet spot, which is really cool, especially playing live. The last thing you want to do is kind of dick around with trying to make something sound good and it kind of sounds mushy until you dial it in exactly right. And with things like the battering ram, I love it because no matter where I twist the knobs, I know it's going to slap no matter what type of kick it is. It could be like super deep, long 808 sounding, groovy kick, or it can be like a slamming hard, hard techno gabber style kick, or anywhere in between, 909 style, 808 style, and every single one of them sounds good. So I love it, and I love the size of it. So those are the two big things for me. So yeah. Anyway, what else? A lot of HP versus the battering ram, 100%. Yeah. So the thing that I feel like may, and I'm kind of reserving until I've used it a bit, but the thing that may justify the HP for the Bohm is that it's not just a kick, right? It's a kick, It also has a secondary kick that it's using for the kind of rumble stuff, which has effects built in. It has a 3-tap delay where you have control over the individual taps, has its own filter and its own effects. Then there's a third module that has a master sidechain ducking that you have control over the amount of ducking and the amount of your kick that you put through with your main mix going through it. And then you also have effects at that level, and those effects can affect either the whole mix or just the kick or just the non-kick, so like the rest of your mix that's going through it. So it's like having a kick, 3 different effects, 3 different delays, 2 different filters, all of that in one thing. So yes, it's a lot of HP if it's going to be just a kick. But if you think about if you were going to try to do all of that stuff with individual models, it would take up twice as much space. So it's the trade-off, right? It's like, it's definitely way more than the battering ram, but it also does a lot of different things. So if I wanted to use the battering ram with a secondary kick, with a 3-tap delay, with a filter, with an effects unit, with a sidechain unit, with an effects unit, with a filter, that would take up a whole row, right? So it just kind of depends on what you're gonna use it for. Anyway, let's see, did you end up recording that track posted on your Instagram story? So I did actually record the loop of it and all the different parts, and I still have it. That's what we were just messing around with here. That was this. So I was still messing with it here and changing up things with the... So yeah, that was the sound that I was working on that I posted on my Instagram story. So yeah, it is. I am still messing around with it, and I will for sure. I mean, I did already sample it so that I can load it into the Blackbox, so I could use it for performing. Kind of the one of the workflows that I really like, because I like to record tracks as performances rather than going in and doing the tracks in the box. So I like to take pieces and parts like this, load them into samplers and patterns that I create in here, and then perform that track in as a one take. So then I can kind of take that whole thing all together. So I've done the first bit of that to be able to do it. So yeah, and I was testing it out with this whole cross patching system to be able to use that sound from the from my studio case with all of my drums and percussion and other voices and atmospheres and samples for my live performance case. So yes, I was using that. Hey, Craig, what's going on? Craig is a fellow live performer who lives right up the road here in Colorado. Good to see you on here. Welcome. So yeah, we were just talking about using gear. Craig does this a lot, actually. He has quite a cool studio setup, and he has also a really interesting live performance rig, and he does a lot of cross patching. If you watch his Instagram stuff, you'll see a lot of images of him working on sound design with things that maybe aren't necessarily in a performance case, but then using pieces and parts together. So it's a pretty cool thing. Let's see, is your chaos device Kalin? From this angle, it looks like it's that module at least on a master effects chain or specific to a voice. So I use the Kalin as an effects send, and I use it as a pre-fader effects send because I like to use it kind of as its own voice, made up of parts of other voices. So for example, any of these sounds here that, I don't have to bring up the faders because obviously it's pre-fader, I can start to send them through the Kalin. So So you can see nothing's up. That's all bits and pieces of stuff being sent through the Kalin. And I have it going through a filter with wave folding. So all of that can be combined together to basically make a voice without having anything else, and then I can bring in the actual pieces. And all of the different sequences from all those different voices kind of interact with each other there. That's, if I was to take out just what's going through the Kalin right now, this is what it sounds like. And everything else is, and then if I take out everything and have just the Kalin, so again, that's just all just the Kalin. So anyway, yeah, it just is it's a way to build out new and interesting and weird effects, or weird sounds as a voice, using pieces and parts of things that are already in. So you don't have to worry about things being in key or going together, because that's already taken care of at the voice level. So when you send that through, these things are all going to be already part of the same kind of sound palette. And so then you can just put them through the Kalin and twist them up a bit, which is fun. That's why I like the Kalin. So let's see. Sweet, can't wait to hear your track finished. Cool, yeah, me too. Should be cool. Throwing mid-highs into it only, created risers from it too. Yeah, Kalin's cool for all kinds of cool things. I mean, I love frequency shifters in general. I just think they're really fun, and I love the way the Kalin can be used, left and right side differently, and upshifting and downshifting, so you can end up with these really cool, interesting things. I'm using it in a really simple way right now, but it can be used in other, much more interesting ways than what I'm doing right now. But it is fun as a send, just because, like I said, you can create whole new voices from things that already exist. So it just exponentially multiplies your voice opportunities that you have in your case, based on the same voices that you have, just by using that kind of mixing of sends. So it's fun that way. So what other questions you guys have? Feel free to pop anything into the chat. Happy to answer questions about whatever. And yeah, let's see here. Make sure I've got all the info. Yeah, and I will throw in, while you guys put up your chat questions again, one more shameless plug, because I do want to try to fill this up so I can. The best way to possibly support this channel is to take one of the courses, because you're going to learn a lot from it. You're going to get a lot out of it. You're going to meet some great people, and at the same time, you help support the channel so that I can keep making content and keep doing this stuff that I love to do. So that's what yeah, so jump on one of the courses, go to circlelive.com/courses, or there's a link in the description of the video, and you can go check out the outline of what's in the course, like all the different sections. Each one of the courses includes over 50 videos that are unique to the course, so you won't find them anywhere else or not on my YouTube channel or whatever. And they go through a specific progression. One course is to teach how to do improvised live performance, from setting goals, setting up your gear, deciding how you want things configured, what gear to select for whatever type of music you're doing or whatever style of play you have and whatever your skill set is, and then being able to create a setup with that, how to practice, how to improve your improvisational skills, which is a unique thing, different ways that you can practice improvising, and then kind of mindset stuff, how to get over the fear of doing stuff improvised and not having to plan everything out. So we go through a lot of that in the course, so definitely check that out. And then the production course is how to use all this stuff in a production setting, not only how to just record in, but how to multi-track, how to single track, how to control DAW from hardware, how to control hardware from DAW, how to record stuff into the DAW that you then bring back into hardware to use, how to create your own sample libraries out of improvised live performances that you multi-track and then divide up. So we talk about all that stuff in the course. So it's a lot of fun. Anyway, let's see. Craig, live performance course is amazing, folks. Highly recommend. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Craig is a star student. He is a fantastic producer and performer. So if you get a chance to check him out, definitely check that out. But yeah, it was great having you in the course too. We got to get together sometime and do some music, actually, since we're so close. We don't do that enough. So anyway, but yeah, definitely check out the courses. Like I said, the August one starts, I think the 7th is the first day of the calls, the group coaching calls, and it goes live a few days before that at the beginning of August, so that you can start in with the videos right away and jump into that. So definitely check those out. What else? Any other questions about the gear, the setup, the methodology, whatever? Questions about the drop, since it's the new shiny object here. Or anything like the Proteus, for example. I haven't really gone over that much in videos yet, but it's a very interesting one. So yeah, I would recommend that. And then as we were talking about before, I use a lot of these, let's see, when a lot of people talk about live performance, they talk about individual synths or devices being like band members. And I don't necessarily do it like that, because I'm not always using something as a bass or always as a lead or always as percussion or whatever. I like to use all of it as all of it. And so that's one of the reasons why I like to have voices that are really flexible and they can do a lot of different things here. As an example, the polycinematic, it's a polyphonic voice that's great for like pads and strings and stuff like that. But in the thing I was recording last night with my voice from my studio case, I was using the polycinematic as more of a percussive voice. So like this. So using just like the percussive elements as kind of like a tonal percussive hit, because it fits really cool into a mix. See, just that percussive element of the polycinematic is really cool. So one thing that I always recommend people to do is really try to push your gear so that you have it doing things that you don't normally think of it doing. So, take that beefy bass synth that you use and make hi-hats with it, or, you know, make a kick drum with it, or make, you know, a lead sound, and really try to push all the gear in as many different directions as you can, because it helps you get more familiar with where those limits are, how far you can push things, and what you can do with your gear. And it's where you come up with really interesting sounds, right? It's where you find those really fun, interesting sweet spots. So definitely I would recommend pushing that stuff out as much as you can to find those things, because that's where you find things like using a polyphonic pad voice as a percussive element, or using the Perkons voice as, you know, as lead elements or whatever. So finding those things is really important. So anyway, let's see. Have you experimented with mono versus stereo on the Kalin? A little bit, but it's, to be honest, I mean, you know this as well as anybody, I keep things mostly mono in my live sets, just so that it sounds better in a club. But yeah, if I had more ways to patch it out, because there's two different sets of stereo outputs and you can do width and all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with it that I just haven't. I've been using it just as a really simple kind of summing together those signals and then frequency shifting what's been summed. That's kind of been my use case for right now. How do you like the Bishop's Miscellany? I like it a lot. I haven't had enough time to really get into it. It's actually something I was going to go over today, and I didn't end up having enough time. But it's a cool device because it can act as a sequencer, and you can save sequences with it. But you can also use it as a sequencer modifier, kind of like what I'm doing the Proteus here, but with a bit more control. So you can run a sequence into it, and then you can modify and shift that sequence and save the things that you shift and make it do really interesting things. It's got two different channels and you can split it out that way. So yeah, it's a very cool one that I'm looking forward to getting more into over the next couple weeks, because yeah, it's a fun one. Let's see. Have you been able to set up the drop with the voices on the Oxy Coral? Not yet. That's my next project, actually. Be interested to see how it could be used to control synth voice. Yeah, so my plan is, so a couple things that the drop can do that you have to kind of, again, it goes back to this planning stage, figure out how you want to use it. So like, for example, the faders on the bottom, you've got two different layers on every preset. So you have A and B. So the A set and B set of knobs and faders. And you can set up every one of them to be either only in A, only in B, or in A and B. So for example, you can have the faders always controlling one device, even when you change to the next page. So on the next page, you have all different knobs that can control things, but your faders are always the same thing. Or vice versa. You can have, like, if you wanted one knob to always do the same thing, no matter whether you were on A or B, you can set it up to be always doing that same thing. So because of that, I've been kind of testing around with some different ways that I want it to work, because I want it to control the Blackbox and the Oxy Coral. That's kind of my goal with it for this setup. And so having the Blackbox set up is what I already did. And then I'm going to work on layer B, which is going to be the Oxy Coral. The idea there is that I want to have each one of the 8 individual voices in the Oxy Coral, because it's 8 voice multi-timbral. I want each of the 8 voices to be controlled on a separate channel so that I can control them all at the same time without having to switch from one voice to another, because that's the one big pain with the Coral, is to get into another voice, you have to go to that voice and remember which one you want to go to and where you are, and it gets confusing. So to be able to do this, to do all of those things individual by channel on one device is amazing. So yeah, that's my next thing. Now I just have to decide if I want the faders to be different per page, if I want it to always be the Blackbox, or if I want it to always be the Coral. We'll see. I haven't decided yet, but I'm going to try a few different ways. So anyway, you use the distortion. Do you use distortion drive in your travel rigs? So I don't have any distortion, but I do have on my main out, I'm using the Lacrime Legio, I think it's called. noise engineering voice that has saturation. So I'm saturating there on my main and then using the limiter as well to drive a bit. So I've got like kind of drive saturation, but I don't have any distortion modules at all. I do, instead of distortion, I use a lot of wave folding. So I have a lot of individual voices and filters and things like that that can wave fold, just because I love the sound of wave folding and I think that that's a fun way to add that kind of grit and harmonics and distortion. So I tend to do it that way instead of distortion modules. I find personally, I'm not very good at controlling distortion modules. So I find like it's really hard to kind of rein in and use the distortion in a way that it doesn't just kind of take over everything. So yeah, I mean, I watch people like Krista Bourgeois, for example, who uses all these different distortions and it sounds so good. And I just have no idea. Like I'm not good with them. So to know how to do that. So I would rather stick with wave folding because that's something that I feel like I can have a lot of control over and keep it getting that same kind of grittiness, but without the lack of control. So yeah. Let's see. Fader lock seems critical. Yeah, it is. But then deciding how you want it to lock is the important point. Let's see here. Thomas at Noisette answered many of my questions. Definitely wanted to know more as they hadn't released much on it. Macro mapping knobs with color and many functions was a cool feature. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big things that makes it really unique is that every one of the knobs can go to 8 separate destinations. And because you have four separate MIDI paths. So 1 through 16, A, B, C, and D going out from this. It also has MIDI merger built in for every single one of those channels. So I can come out from the Oxy to the split into each one of those channels and then out from those channels to the devices. And I can merge my Oxy sequences with all of my drop CC messages and all that stuff that I want to send. And so it merges internally, so I don't need an external merger box, which is great. And then the macro knobs, and that's another part of like the deep setup with this thing, is you set up devices and then when you're setting up the individual knobs, each knob has 8 slots of destinations that they can go, and you can select the device and the channel so that you can have one knob that's a macro that's going out on 4 different MIDI paths to 4 different devices. And so like the power for doing macros and creating stuff across multiple devices is pretty nuts. Like I haven't seen anything that does that. So I'm excited to see what people start to use this for in their setups, because I think that like if you were somebody that had, 4 or 5 different groove boxes and you centralize them all through something like the drop, it would be crazy powerful. Or if you were going to do it with modular, the best way to do it would be with MIDI to CV conversion in your case. So come out on one of those many MIDI channels and then use that for controlling CV. And then you can use these macro knobs to control all sorts of things in your case. Like if you wanted to do like a master filter cutoff, you could have one macro that goes to the filter cutoff on every single device in your case. So when you turn that, every single one of them, the filter cutoff would change. So like there's a lot you'll be able to do with this because it's so deep, but it's kind of like an octatrack where people are gonna have to screw with it for a while and figure out all the creative ways to use it, right? And all of a sudden you're gonna be like, oh my God, did you see that one guy, the way they're using it? And so, yeah, it's gonna be awesome to see once this gets like out in the wild and people start using it for all sorts of different setups. So let's see. I wanted to ask if you've missed the heat plus effects. I have to be honest with you, I have not. Just on a whim, which I really didn't plan on, I was like, wow, I wonder if that would work. So I had this, the Rucha Legio from Noise Engineering and their filter. And I got it like a year, 2 years ago maybe, right when it first came out. And I never really found a good use for it. And I was like, man, I think I'm just gonna sell it. And then I was looking on their website at all the different firmwares that you can flash to different devices. And I had never really thought about flashing the Legio one. I have some of the Versios, so I can flash for different different effects. And I went on the Legio and it was like, oh, here's your kind of end of chain processing unit with saturation, a limiter, and a compressor or expander, however you want to use it, all in one 6 HP device. So I was like, let's try that out. So I did my little cross patch thing because it was in my studio case, and I cross patched everything to it and back in. And to be honest, it sounded as good or better than the sound I was getting out of the analog Heat Plus effects for the use that I was using it for. Obviously, the Heat Plus effects does way more than this does, but for my use, it actually sounded even better. So I was like, well, great, I'm going to try it. So when I went to Berlin a couple weeks ago for my show there, it was the first time, man, the first time I can remember, like maybe since I started doing live shows, that I didn't travel with an analog heat. And that was always kind of like my secret weapon, was that on the end of chain to saturate and to get that last bit of drive that I wanted to kind of master the tracks. And being able to do that with the saturation and the limiter here, it sounds so good. Like, I was blown away. So now the way my path goes is I have my main coming out of the mixer, which is all of so it's the main mixer plus the extra units, so the two other Exelon units, all come out one main. That main goes into the Oxy Meta for performance effects, and then from the Meta it goes into the Legio to get saturation and drive. And then it goes from that into the monitor, which is my output module. And then I've got 1/4-inch outs coming from the monitor. That's also where I have headphones. That's where I attach my in-ears when I perform and stuff, is all to the monitor. So it made this cool kind of path. The only thing I sacrificed was I can't do the bass mono that I was doing in there. And I haven't really missed it because I do a fairly good job of keeping the bass really mono anyway throughout the mix. But with the new case that I'm getting, because it has the 1U rows, I think I may add in an Endorphins Golden Master just so I can use the bass mono function on it. Just to be able to make sure that everything below the cutoff that I want is able to stay mono, so it'll sound good in a club. But this sounded great. I played on a really good sound system over there, and I didn't miss it. So I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised at how good it sounded, and one less box to carry. Like, I'm down to the point now where my live rig is this modular that goes into my rolling carry-on. The Oxy one also fits in the rolling carry-on, so that all goes together with power supplies and everything like that. And then in my backpack, I just put my Blackbox and now the drop, and I was using the Launch Control XL, but just those two in my backpack with my other stuff, and these in a rolling carry-on, and that's the whole live rig. So pretty cool. It sounds great. So now I'm not going to sell it. I was going to sell it, and now it's become an integral part of my rig. So I'm pretty excited for it. So let's see where we're at here. When you record for making loops, do you use in-case saturation limiter or post-process in the DAW? I actually use both. So what I'll do is I'll get the sound kind of sounding the way I want it to through here, and then I'll record, like for example with this sound that I was recording last night, I'll record just the master out, so I get all of the processing of the case going into one channel in the DAW, and then I can go in and I did add other mastering before I kind of downloaded the sample in order to be able to put into the Blackbox. So I did add an additional saturator and a limiter and a little bit of EQ and a low end filter to kind of take off some of the low frequencies. So it just really cleans and tightens up the sound so that when I put it into the Blackbox, it's gonna not mess with the other stuff that's in the case. So I guess the answer is both. I use processing on the way into the DAW, also in the DAW before I have it come back out again. So both things. But that's not always necessary, but in this case, that was what I did. Let's see, I was thinking of the drop and the Game Changer Plasma in MIDI mode. Yeah, I mean, I've only messed with the Plasma for a very short time at Superbooth, so I can't give a huge opinion on it. It sounded cool, looks cool. But yeah, the thing with having the drop is it opens up a lot of these modules that I normally wouldn't have used for live performance because they're so fidgety. And now I can kind of get under the hood with a setup in the drop and then control everything. So I'm really excited for getting this particularly set up with the Oxy, just to be able to use all of those 8 channels of the Oxy in a way that's accessible. So to be able to do, filters or decays or sound design bits using the knobs in the drop, to be able to really dig deep into the Coral. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about that. Let's see here. That was today's topic in the hybrid course. Yes, it was today's topic in the hybrid course. So yeah, we were talking a lot about what I was doing yesterday and kind of how I got that sound in and what I was doing with it. And that's one of the cool things too. In the course, we go through a lot of how you can use things that you make with your hardware, not only in production, but as samples to then put back into a sampler and use again in your performance, or create your own sample packs, or create your own sample folders of things that you then use later on. Then you've got all these like samples that are basically like having a bunch of sample packs, except every single sample in the pack is something that was made by you. So it's all original creation. So we talk a lot about how to do that, how to multi-track in a live performance, and then take all of those individual sounds that are individually tracked and cut those up into little pieces and parts that you can then save and use later, either in the DAW or in your hardware setup. So a lot of different cool stuff that you can do with your, when you combine the two together. I am not the person that's like, oh, it has to be DAW-less or blah, 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 blah. No, I'm a big believer of use whatever works. And if that's a sampler, an analog synth, and an iPad, cool. Use that, like use whatever. It's all about being creative and making music creatively. I like a hybrid workflow for production because there are things that I can do in my hardware rig that I can't do in a DAW. And then there's things that I can do in a DAW that I can't do in my hardware rig. And so why not combine them and get the best of both? Use the best things from this with the best things from the DAW and combine those two things together. And then you end up with the best possible kind of outcome, the best possible end result. So I would definitely recommend it for everyone. So let's see what else. Any other questions? It looks like the questions are slowing. So let me know if you guys have questions about anything, if there's anything that you would like to chat about or ask about. Happy to discuss. Especially about gear that's kind of like new gear or gear that's, just coming out or on the way out. So things like the drop, Bishop's Miscellany is new, Proteus is new. The new Morph modular case that's coming out. There's kind of reasons why you would want or not want certain ones of those things. So I think it's always important to kind of figure out if it's the right thing for you. There's a lot of gear that I get that you guys never see on this channel, because if I don't get it, if I don't get the gear, then like if I get the gear and I don't like it, you're not going to see it. It's not that no one's going to pay me to do a glowing review for something that I don't like. So if you see it on here, it's because I'm actually using it. And I'll tell you what my experience is, like how I'm using it, what I'm using it for, and why it's a good thing for me, and why I think, who I might think it's a good thing for. So definitely, happy to answer questions about whatever. So let's see, do you use any other cable than black? I don't. Obviously you can see there's some gray ones on here now that are my cross-patch cables. And I don't know if you can, you probably can't see. Maybe you can if I switch views, yeah. Maybe if I take this off, you can see back here, I have a whole bunch of other cables that are hanging that are all sorts of different colors. So I use those a lot for when I'm patching here in this case, but when I play live, I only use black cables. And there's a couple reasons. One is obviously I like the look. I think it looks cool. So whatever, you get to customize your thing, so you might as well use a color you like. But for me, it serves a real practical purpose, as do the black faceplates. I find with my eyes in a dark room with smoke in the room and stuff like that, I find that the contrast of white writing on black panels is easier for me to see in the dark than trying to see black writing on silver panels. It really doesn't show up. Like as soon as the lights dim, it's really hard for me to see stuff. So if I need to look and see what something is, I can't really see that. And then the black cable part of it is kind of for the same thing. I find it's much easier for me. It's less distracting for my eye if I'm looking through cables, if they're not a color that's distracting the attention. So having all those black cables, it allows me to see through and see what's underneath things better than if it was a bunch of different colors kind of confusing the eye as you look at stuff. So I like to keep it really neutral so that it's easy to see in the dark. That's the biggest thing. And I like the look, so whatever. It's a little bit of both. There's a little bit of kind of superficiality of the look, of the vibe, but there really is a practical use for both the black panels and the black cables. So, but there's a lot of other people that like to use different color cables for different signal paths, so it's easier to trace, which I totally get that. Like some people have an individual voice that will use one color, or they'll have audio path is one and CV is another and gate is another, so you can kind of see where everything is. I totally understand that. Not such a big deal for me because I'm not patching a lot live, so it doesn't really matter as much. For me, it's more important to be able to see the individual panels underneath. So, oh yeah, for example, I use a color for clock, different color just for modulation, the rest of my set, and forget pre-patching is black. Yeah, so it's, again, it's the great thing with modular, right? You can set it up any way you want. You build your own instrument, you build your workflow the way you want, you make it comfortable for you. For me, just the visual cue of being able to see things with high contrast, white on black is really helpful for me as well. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people that use different colors for different parts of their signal path. Whether it's, I saw somebody recently that was using individual voices were different colors. So that way they could look at their case and see like everything that was routed to a certain voice, whether it was modulation or CV or gate or the audio path. It was everywhere in the case that was whatever green was all coming from one voice. And so it was cool because then if you needed to adjust something or check connection, you knew where the connection was on the other end and kind of which green thing it was. So I think that's cool as well. But it's, yeah, it's all personal preference, which is the beautiful thing with modular. So I've got an Oxy on order. Any recommendations for features to explore? Do you have the Mark 1 or the Mark 2? Because there's different features in the Mark 2. Both are very good. I still have my Mark 1 right here. Both are very good. I would say the cool thing with the Oxy 1 is that it can be as simple or as deep as you want it to be. So I would say at the beginning, use it in its most simple sense, right? Use each sequencer can be one sequencer. Use it as like a mono or a polyphonic or however you want to use it. And then I would say use the multi-track sequencers. I'm a big fan of the multi-track sequencers because you can use, you can have multiple things that interact on in one visual space. So you can see visually when steps line up or when they're in spaces between. So it gives you a lot of opportunity to be able to sequence without having to actually hear it. You can see things visually, and that's unique. It's if you're using an Electron device and you want to go from one track to another, you're going to switch tracks and you don't see the other one. You only see one track at a time. Having multiple, using the multi-track sequencer type, so you can have 8 different lanes on one page, is really handy when you're doing things like that. So obviously it's great for drums, but it's also really good, I find, for melodic stuff as well, because you can use, like if you're doing things like call and response, you can see where the call is and where the response is, and you can see them next to each other, and you can make sure that they fit correctly visually before you bring that sound in. So for doing stuff improvised live, it's really cool to be able to see everything like that. So that's another cool one. And then I see you said you're getting the Mark II. So with the Mark II, there's obviously some really cool things like the Accumulator, which is a really interesting way. Let me see if I can just do something really quick here with the Accumulator. actually, we'll just do like this. So if we were going to use, take the effects off here. You cannot see this very well. So let me just move this camera really quick so you can see the sequencer. Okay. So you can see you have a really simple pattern here. So if you were to hold this down, you've got your normal velocity, octave, gate, trigger. So you can, obviously shift up an octave if you want to. You can change the velocity, you can change the gate, and change the trigger percentage, so like probability, right, by holding it down. But where this page is blinking right here, if you can see that, really, if you press on the page, now you're at the step submenu, so you can add repeats to it. So if you wanted to add a repeat, so you see every time this one plays, it's actually repeating twice, and you're having it do 2 repeats on a duration of 2 steps. But you can do it all in one step, or over 5 steps, right? So if you do it like, let's say you do 5 in one, it becomes a ratchet. So that's one thing that you can do. You can also make those steps so that, so let's do it like a ratchet sound. You can make that ratchet increase in velocity, and you can also make it slow. Here, I'm going to take these off. So I can make this slow down. Here. So this is like at its normal speed, or you can make it slow. And you can make it go, I don't have it set up on velocity right now, but if you have it set on velocity, you can make it get louder or quieter as it goes, which is also another cool way to do sounds. So then the other big thing is the accumulator. So let's go to the next page, and that gets you to the accumulator. What this does is you can say, how many semitones do you want it to go up or down each time it hits this step? And those things will accumulate until it gets to the number of times you say. So let's have it go up 1 semitone until it gets to 7. And then it'll start back over. So it goes up semitones 1 each time around, and then when it gets to 7, it starts back to 0. That's in this mode, but you can have it do you can have it go different ways. You can have it go up and down. You can have it go up and then down. You can have it do random, and then you can have the accumulator be positive or negative steps as well. And if you set different ones to do this, then you can kind of leave it, and those will interact with each other throughout time. So this is like, so some are going up 2 steps and then starting, some are going up 7 steps, then starting over, some are going down steps before they go up. So just 3 steps will now generatively interact with each other over time. And so again, add in some effects. Right? So with this, you've only got 3 steps, you've only got 3 notes, but each one of them is accumulating differently, right? Then you can start to add in things like what we were looking at before, like repeats. And then you can add in trigger probabilities. So they have different probabilities with different accumulators, and also some of them using the repeats. So everything that this is doing over all this time is all coming from 3 steps. And then you can have certain ones that maybe you want them to have them always happen. Right, so this just gives you a lot of opportunity to do. So again, you can go in and have each one of those things have its own unique set of parameters with it, right? So if you're going to get a Mark II, those are new features, the accumulator, and then the way that the repeats work, that you can slow them down or speed them up. Those are new on this, and it makes for something that's really, really fun. The other thing that's really fun here is when you go into the performance mode, this allows you to have mutes and transpose all on one page, which is really cool. You didn't have that before. So like if we were doing something like, let's say here. So this is on sequencer 2. So if I wanted to, I can mute that here on this page and bring it back in. I can also So I've got the transpose for that here. These are multi-tracks. So this is where I have, for example, kick, hat, and perk on one. And so I've got mutes here. So I can mute or unmute those. And then it gives you so you've got some performance effects with that here. So this performance mode is also new on the Mark II. It wasn't on the Mark I. So anyway, yeah, so it depending on the kind of music that you do, these are going to be more or less useful. I don't know if you guys have watched any of Ura's videos using the Mark II, but with his style, he uses a lot of really simple notes and then generative sounds. So he uses a lot of the accumulator functions and things like that in his performances. So I would definitely check out his videos because he uses them a lot more than I do. I like them for kind of what I was doing with my cross patching yesterday, being able to come up with interesting ideas. I don't want to be experimenting around live, but I love experimenting around when I'm recording or making samples that I can use live, because I can spend an hour to find something really cool as far as, you know, the sequence, the accumulator settings, maybe a second sequencer interacting with it, a really cool complex oscillator, find that really cool sound and then say, okay, now that I've got that, I'm going to record that loop and I'm going to use that in my live performance. So yeah, it's very cool for that. I use these kind of things much more for production than I do for live performance, but it's to each his own. That's the amazing thing about all this gear, is that with the way gear is today, you can customize it the way you want to use it. So you can set it up to do anything you want it to do, make whatever kind of music you want it to make. So makes it more fun that way, for sure. Let's see. Any other questions? Anyone else out there? Otherwise, we'll probably call it a day here. But if you've got questions, definitely chuck them into the chat, and I'm happy to answer. While you make up your mind, if you've got some questions, one last plug, jump on one of the courses if you're interested. Jump into one of the courses, either the performance course or the production course, both a lot of fun. You're going to meet some great people, become part of the community. People have taken the course. There's about 100 people that have taken the courses now, and they're all in this online group, so you can get to know each other, and a bunch of them went and hung out at Super Booth together this year and stuff. So it's fun to get to know everybody, which is very cool. Let's see here. What do we got going? Dude, MK2 got me questioning things. Yeah, man, I'm telling you, it's the thing. Looks like a significant upgrade with those features for the performances. Yeah, I mean, it's like the device itself is still the same. Like, it still does all the other stuff that the other one did. This just added in things like that. It also added in another cool thing. If you're into using like groove pool and swing and different kind of grooves in your performances, you can make those in here, and you can also load them in, and then you can save them on the SD card. So then you can just assign them to tracks. So you can add your swing to your hats or swing to whatever, and you can save those presets, and you can save those groove files, and you can load them onto different MIDI tracks. So that's another really cool one as well. That was a big upgrade with this. And then obviously more sequencers, more MIDI channels out. So this one has six independent MIDI paths. So 1 through 16, A, B, C, and D. So you've got 96 channels of outgoing MIDI, which is cool because you can draw in, modulation, and then you can send that out via MIDI to something. And so it kind of expands the capabilities of other devices, which is another super cool one about this guy. All right. Well, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you guys all for joining in. It was great to have you here. Hope you learned something. Hope you got some questions answered. And if you need something else, reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions about the courses or anything that you saw here today. Reach out, via Instagram Messenger or whatever. It's always the easiest way. And hope to see you in the courses. Thank you guys very much for joining in, and hope to see you on the next one. Have a great day.